enough talking, and let's see how we can do this in case 6. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our smoke test, because the smoke test that we have, this is already a great starting point because we know exactly what we want to do. So the smoke test is perfect for that scenario. So let's go ahead and rename this into load test. And of course, we can also go ahead and check if everything here is working fine. Now, let's say our baseline value is 100 users. This is what we want to have. Now, how can we create these stages? Because if we leave the configuration as it is right now, case 6 will try instantly to send these 100 users. And of course, instead of 30 seconds, we can use here 30 minutes. So the same concept that I've discussed before can also be applied to case 6. And this is called stages. So what we need to do here is actually define a stages configuration. So inside options, I'm going to go ahead and write stages. And this will be an array, meaning that we can have as many stages as we like. So inside here, we're going to have an object where we define the configuration of the stage. So what do we want to define for that stage? So first of all, we want to have here a duration. So this will be some duration, let's say 30 seconds. And then this stage also doesn't have the concept of a virtual user. It has the concept of a target. I'm going to write here target. So this is like the target that we want to achieve. So I said earlier, we want 100 users. So if we want 100 users, then let's kind of write here 100. So what will happen here in this stage is that for a duration of 30 seconds, case 6 will ramp up the traffic from 1 to 100. Now, we discussed earlier, if we want this test to run for 30 minutes, then in that situation, 30 seconds is probably a bit less than ideal. So in this case, we want to have here something like 5 minutes. For a test that runs 30 minutes, 5 minutes ramp up time is a pretty good time. Can go with 3 minutes, but it really depends a bit on the application. All right. So this is the first part. I'm going to go ahead and remove virtual users from here because this is something that we're not going to use anymore. Okay, so I'm going to copy this configuration, add a comma here. And next we're going to define our upcoming stage. So what are we doing here with this stage? Well, in this case, we want to stay at 100. So during 5 minutes, we have started from 0, we went to 100, and then for the longest duration that we want to have in this test, we want to stay here. So I'm going to stay here for 30 minutes. And then after we stayed here for 30 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and copy the exact same configuration and paste it here. Make it a bit bigger so that you can properly see what's going on. Right. So in this case, again, we're going to go with 5 minutes and our target will be 0. So we're starting at 0 and we want to go up to 100. And we're doing this in 5 minutes. Then for 30 minutes, we are staying at 100. So there will be 100 virtual users for 30 minutes. And then in 5 minutes, we're going to go from 100 to 0. So we're going to ramp down. In this case, we're using this website from case 6, and we really don't want to put so much load on this application, but this is how you configure it. Now I'm going to go ahead and just run a simple test. So I'm going to say here, target is actually 10 users. And what we're going to do here, instead of 5 minutes, let's say I'm going to use here 10 seconds for ramping up and ramping down. And instead of running this for 30 minutes, I'm going to run it for 30 seconds. So this is just to demonstrate how this works in case 6, but it is not designed to be a true realistic load test. So again, do not put load on an application that you do not own. In this case, I'm going to only send 10 users. And if you want to be here even more protective, we can disable some of these requests, but this load is going to be pretty small. So I'm going to go ahead with case 6 run, and this is going to be our load test. So we're going to see here what's going on. So we have here the virtual users increasing 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so in 10 seconds, now we have 10 of the 10 virtual users. So now we are in the phase where we're keeping these 10 virtual users, and they are sending requests, and they are sending requests. And we are doing this now for 30 seconds. And we're going to wait a bit until this period is over. And then what we will see here is actually these virtual users slowly decreasing. So we are 40 seconds into the test, and you should see here now we have 9 virtual users, 8, 7, 6, and so on until we will reach 0 virtual users at the end of the test. So this is how, by using these stages, we have informed K6 how we want to send this traffic. So instead of just sending it all at once, we can control exactly how this comes. Now, the rest of them, how and which requests have worked, this stays absolutely the same. The discussion that we had in terms of how to look at the report here is the same as when doing a smoke test. So we're not going to go over that once again, but just want to demonstrate how we can use this stages configuration in K6. Now, you have seen that I've been using the terms typically or usually quite a lot. And what you need to understand is that things are not set in stone. I'm giving you here some examples that are realistic so that you can get a rough idea of what is typical value and which would be values that do not make any sense. Now, it is always best to work with people responsible for the infrastructure to keep an eye on what is going on with the servers and to understand if they are scaling up and down as designed. If your application has never been put under a load test and you have absolutely no idea how many users it can handle, it is best to start with lower values so that you can gather some data. In this case, load tests can help us understand if we need to increase our server resources to be able to handle the expected traffic. So for example, we estimate that our application needs to handle 300 users, right? Our first test shouldn't be like all of a sudden 300. Right? Let's start with 50, then increase it to 100, 150, 200. So slowly going to that value until we reach that value, right? So that we can have an idea of how this test is working, how our systems work. Now, what you need to understand is that K6 will not give you server specifications or tell you exactly how you need to change your infrastructure to be able to handle more traffic. That's not the job of the tool. The job of the tool is only to send that traffic, and then you need to figure out on your own what needs to change in order to be able to handle that traffic. Now, a load test should be part of the typical tests that are executed before deploying an application to production. It is also wise to run a load test every time infrastructure changes have been made, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem. This will save you a lot of time later on. So we always want to make sure there are no regressions from the current working state. In other words, we want to ensure that tomorrow the app will have at least the same performance as it has today. Now, going back to the configuration here, what I want you to understand is that you can use as many stages as needed. For a load test, this is a minimal configuration. Of course, you can define multiple stages where you're simulating some regular traffic, let's say, for example, during the night, and then as people wake up and start using your application, of course, the traffic will not start from 0, but will start from some baseline value and then increase to, let's say, a more typical day value. So it's absolutely fine to start from 0 to 100, stay there for a while, then increase to 400, stay there, then decrease to 200, and so on. So it's not set in stone that it needs to be exactly these 3 stages, but this is like a minimal typical configuration that is good enough to start with. Now, when we're testing an application and we identify issues, it does not make sense to deploy that application to production since it will impact users during normal conditions. So if a load test shows values that are unacceptable, it is then unacceptable to deploy that version to production. Going back, so where are we running these tests? Aren't we running them in production? No. So typically a load test would be a test that we execute on a pre-production environment. And that pre-production environment should mimic as much as possible the production environment. And nowadays, it is so easy, especially in cloud infrastructures, to create an identical or almost identical system that runs in pre-production, where you can run these tests essentially in isolation, where there's no external traffic or anything else that is impacting your test result. So Running such a test on production may lead to degraded performance in production because the servers then need to handle the traffic that K6 is generating and also the user. So it has to serve both virtual users and actual users. Now, to recap, a load test is designed to test the application under typical conditions that occur in production. A load test is not designed to break the system. The goal is to understand if the application's performance has degraded or not compared to the previous version. A load test, during the duration of a load test, will not have a constant load. Rather, we have 3 stages. We have a ramp up until we get to the desired value, then we stay at that desired value for most of the test duration, and then we ramp down to allow the application to scale down. And finally, we should run a load test every time a new version of the application is about to be deployed or after doing infrastructure changes, regardless how minor they may seem.